like to thank everyone for inviting me to speak at the meeting today. I kind of look at soil health. Jay Fuhrer years ago made an analogy to me. There's a pathway to soil health, and by joining this meeting today, everyone has gotten on that path, or you'll go, how far you go down that path will depend upon your management style and what you decide to do. I don't know that there's anything more important we can do than trying to improve the health of our soils. I think it's a pretty high priority on our farm. So what you're looking at there in the background is a forage crop that we planted several years ago and grazed it off, and we've continued to do this. And really what we're trying to do with soil health is really maximize our resources on our farm. Okay, how come? Anybody know why the slideshow isn't moving?
If can you is there are there arrows on your on your screen there?
There's a pause share. I wonder if that's doing it.
Mark, I found the arrows down in the left corner to advance the slides.
Was that it there? No. Uh-oh. Oh, there it moved. I don't know why, but.
Yep, there it goes. Looks good. Thanks.
Okay, so what we're looking, when we look at resource management, really the first thing to look at is the soil, and Paul and some other speakers today have been through this, but minimum disturbance, previous crops residue in place, trying to improve that soil aggregation and allow that soil to breathe as water comes into your soil. Air has to be able to escape, and then vice versa. As moisture goes away, there'll be more air in the soil. And then improving the soil structure so we can get that moisture down through the soil and get it away from that surface and away from any soil moisture evaporation. And then, of course, improving organic matter is something that we've been trying to do on our farm. And then when it comes to our other resource of water, we use the previous crops residues and improve soil health. And by doing this, we're able to continuous crop on our dryland acres by improving that water infiltration and then reducing the soil moisture evaporation. And our soil moisture evaporation out here is about 4 times higher than the amount of moisture we get in a year. So we do evaporate off a lot of moisture in an open pan study. So soil moisture evaporation, anything we can do to limit that is a big benefit for us. I should tell everyone our farm's about 10 miles north of Alliance, kind of in the central part of the panhandle, and we're about a 15-inch average rainfall area, so we're pretty low precipitation. The other thing that I think is really important with our goal of improving soil health, it allows us to conserve our groundwater resource on our irrigated acres. We have several center pivots. We farm 9 pivots across varying soil types, anywhere from a Valent fine sand to a silt loam, heavier silt loam type soil. So we have a lot of variation in soil types on the land that we farm. And one of the big benefits when we irrigate, and especially now with these low pressure systems that we're using, we're concentrating a lot of water in a pretty small area going through these center pivots. So it's real important that we're able to infiltrate that water and get it into the field where it's applied and without any runoff. So the water management part of soil health, especially even under irrigation, is really important, I think. The other resources that I think we tend to maybe overlook a little bit are capturing maximum amount of sunlight by using a living plant to capture sunlight. And the other thing that I think managing soil microbes, and we've done enough microbial testing on our farms with different crops growing and things like that, that how the crops you're growing on top of the soil definitely affect what's going on underneath the soil. And I think as time goes by, we'll learn more and more about managing soil microbes. A little bit of the history of our farm. We adopted no-till crop production back in the late 1980s on our dryland farm, and it was working well enough that we decided that we just well put the irrigated acres into a no-till as well. And so by 1994, we started. Our whole farm was in the no-till. At that point, our soil organic matter was about 0.6 of 1% on dryland acres and about 0.8% on our irrigated acres. The other thing this allowed us to do was eliminate summer fallow and on our dryland acres, and we went to continuous cropping back then. And this was really kind of the beginning of our path towards improved soil health, although we didn't realize it, didn't know it. Soil health wasn't even on our radar screen at that point. We were going to no-till to try and utilize all of our land resources, and then reduce machinery costs and fuel inputs and those types of things. But really, soil health wasn't even on the radar at that point. So when I look back through our slides, this photo was taken in 2008, and this was our first forage crop that we put in following an irrigated winter wheat crop. We were at that point, starting to learn about soil health and the importance of adding more diversity into your system. So that was 2008 is when we started with the forage crops on our farm on our irrigated acres. So I guess we've been at it for quite some time now. So on our dryland acres, what we looked at doing is developed a crop rotation. We've always tried to add a legume into our dryland cropping acres. We started back, I would say about 93, we started with chickpeas and field peas on our farm, and we've had one or the other, mostly field peas, but we did have a period where we grew chickpeas for 7 or 8 years as well. So we've had a legume into our rotation for quite some time. And the other thing that we've done over time is we still have fallow periods, because like I say, 15-inch rainfall area, and we're continuous cropping. We have fallow periods, but we don't have the typical 18-month summer fallow period like we had when we were doing wheat and summer fallow. But we still do have fallow periods built into our rotation. So what our current rotation is on our dryland acres is we have the winter wheat, then a fairly lengthy fallow period where we go to corn, and then we have another fallow period over the winter from the corn to when we plant yellow field peas in the spring. And then the field peas are done using moisture right around the 1st of July. So we get about a 2.5 month fallow period before we go back to our winter wheat crop again. So that's the rotation we're using on our dryland acres. We've got a cool season grass, a warm season grass, and a cool season legume in that rotation. And that rotation's worked out real well for us. Our soil organic matter over time has improved. I've seen it as high as 2.2% on soil testing. More of the range will be in that 1.4 to maybe 1.8% organic matter. So, you know, and there's variances in soil testing. But I feel pretty confident we've raised our organic matter by a percentage point over time with the no-till. So it's, you know, gradually has come up over time. The only drawback I have to this rotation, and I'm not sure what we can really do about it or what we're gonna do. We had one event in 2012 where we had some 60-mile-an-hour winds with gusts up to 90. It lasted for about 2 straight days, day and night, and we had wind erosion that fall. It was so dry we weren't able to get the winter wheat up out of the ground, and anyhow we did wind up having to get a chisel plow out and rough the soil up in strips to control the erosion problem that had developed. And we had a smaller scale event of that this year. We weren't able to get all of our winter wheat out of the ground this fall, and we've got a few portions in a couple fields where we had some wind erosion again this year. You know, it's only been twice in 30 years, but it happened, and I was really hoping to avoid that. But that is an issue that we have with that. The other thing, I'll switch gears now kind of to the irrigation and what we're doing there. We've tried to develop a more diverse rotation on our irrigated acres as well. You know, the importance of diversity, I think that's been kind of what proven over when you're looking at building soil health. I think, you know, diverse rotations are important. So what we start off with is a winter wheat, which is a cool season grass. And now behind that winter wheat, we'll go in with some type of forage crop, and then we'll graze it off during the winter. We don't have any cattle in our operation, but we have neighbors that do, so they bring in cattle to graze off the forage crops. And typically what we've been doing is like maybe some oats and turnips and that type of stuff. This year we have also tried some rye. We'll see how that goes. We've got a problem that it has developed has been we now have some common water hemp is starting to show up out here in the Panhandle, getting to be more of a problem. We have some of that in a few of our fields. And so we went with a rye cover crop because we want it to regrow in the spring, and we're going to use it to try to help control the water hemp. But we're using the cattle and the forage crop to help manage our residue with our no-till system. We'll follow the winter wheat with a warm season legume, which is typically has been edible beans, but because of the water hemp issue, we're going to try soybeans this year for the first time. So we're going to try to use the soybeans. They have better herbicide. They have better herbicides to control that common water hemp than what's available in edible beans. So we're actually going to try some soybeans this year. And behind that warm season legume, there's an opportunity maybe for another cover crop. And since we go to corn following the edible bean or the warm season legume rotation, we'll go to corn. Maybe there's an opportunity there to put in like a winter pea that'll come back in the spring. Go ahead and let it grow, and then plant the corn crop into that winter pea. So that's something we might take a look at as far as an opportunity down the road. Then we also will come back in after the corn crop and we'll graze those stocks. And part of that again is to help us manage some of the residue on our irrigated acres. So there's 2 times during a 4-year crop rotation that we'll use cattle to help manage some of the high residue crops. Then what we go to following the corn is yellow field peas, which gives us a cool season legume in our crop rotation. So that's kind of our base irrigated crop rotation. It's working out pretty well for us, I think. It includes all 4 of the crop types, as well as a forage crop for grazing that we're trying to also, build soil health with. And as far as the water conservation part of this goes, so with that crop rotation, we're probably averaging right around 8 inches of irrigation per center pivot per year across all the soil types. The heavier soils, it's a little less than that, might be a little more than that on the sandier soils. But I don't think there's any doubt that improved soil health and the residues for reducing soil moisture evaporation, the improved water infiltration, it's all added up to where we can get by with a kind of a minimal amount of irrigation and raise some pretty good irrigated crops. So, and on our irrigated acres, our organic matter has been up. I've seen it as high as 2.8%. And there again, it's just the randomness of soil testing. But it's, it kind of runs between that 1.8 to 2.1, 2.2% on our soil samples now. Like I say, I have seen it as high as 2.8%. So over time, we have been able to improve the organic matter content of the soil, and as we've learned today, that can be real beneficial in crop production. So some of the opportunities that I see on our irrigation for more than what we can do, we're going to actually do that this spring. We're going to go in behind some of our irrigated corn, and instead of going to peas, where we're also having some problem with that water hemp, we're going to drill some oats early this spring, let the oats grow up, and then we'll come in there and plant. This year we'll plant soybeans. Like, depending on how well it works, we might even consider edible beans later on. But we're going to use that forage cover, that cover crop, to help with our weed control in the soybean or edible bean crop. And also we'll get the benefit of having a living root out there longer during the year. The other thing, like I said, we may look at doing some winter peas following that warm season legume crop, where we're going to rotate back to corn. Well, I should say that on some of that rye behind the winter wheat, where we're going to go in with edible beans, we're going to try one field this year with edible beans behind the rye cover crop, and we're going to let that rye grow up enough that we can plant the edible beans, and hopefully when we kill that rye off, we'll have enough of a mat of residue there that it'll help control that water hemp in the edible beans as well. So that'll be interesting. We'll see how that works for us. As far as dryland opportunities, the one real opportunity that I see, and like you say, we don't have cattle on our farm, but I think at some point that would be a good addition if we can bring livestock back onto our farm. We basically have went about a generation without cattle on the farm. So bringing cattle back onto the farm is proven to be a pretty good hurdle for us. But what I look at doing instead of trying to plant a cover crop or a forage crop like following winter wheat in this low rainfall area that we have, I think our best bet is just to make a forage crop part of our dryland crop rotation, and then we can get the benefits of raising the cover crop and grazing the cattle, and have a pretty good chance of success just by making them part of our crop rotation. And I think if we had cattle like in a year like this year, where it looks like, you know, more than likely we're going to have a fairly dry year, more forages and might be a better, where we often fail, we can generally grow plant material, but trying to produce grain is where we often fail in a dry year. So we might be better off, if I had cattle this year, would be an opportunity. Maybe you expand your forage acres and go less grain production and more grazing. I think it would give us some more opportunities, and might be able to weather the drier years better with forages rather than trying to produce crops. But anyhow, I think that'll be something that we'll look at on our farm as far as dryland opportunities. The other opportunities that I see coming is going to be the carbon sequestration. I think markets and probably government policies are going to move towards paying producers to store carbon to offset some carbon emissions or things like that. So I think there's going to be some opportunities for that as well down the pipeline. So we'll see with how that goes. And with that, that's all I've got. I'd open it up for questions. I do have my contact info there. If anybody'd like to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to visit with them and answer any questions or anything I can do. So that's about all I've got for today, Mitch.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate that, and some very impressive results that you've been able to get. We have time for at least a couple questions, and I'll if David wants to throw up the poll, that would be great. Do we have any questions for Mark? There's the poll. Mark, I have a quick question for you. What do you see as your biggest hurdle to bring in cattle onto your farm?
Well, we just haven't had cattle on the farm for quite some time. Back in the early 70s, we tore up the pasture land that was left and put down center pivots, and that pretty much eliminated the cattle off the operation. And so a generation of us haven't dealt with cattle. So it's a pretty good hurdle to try and learn how to do that, I guess. So, I'll see it. I'm too old to be a cowboy, but maybe my nephew will. It'll be his decision whether we do that or not.